The first thing I noticed wasn't my son. It was his car, still parked in my driveway, engine off for the third morning that week. No rush, no urgency, just sitting there like it belonged to someone who was afraid to come inside. I stood at my kitchen window holding a cup of coffee I didn't realize had already gone cold. I wasn't drinking it anymore. I was watching him, Darnell, my son, inside that car, not moving, not coming out, just sitting, like he was rehearsing a moment he didn't know how to live through. And I remember thinking, this is not normal, not for him, not for any of my children. Darnell has always been decisive. Even as a boy, he was the one who opened doors too fast, spoke too quickly, finished sentences before you could fully think them through. But that morning, he didn't even open his door for almost 4 full minutes. When he finally did, it wasn't like a man arriving at his mother's house. It was like a man stepping into a role he had practiced too many times in his head. I set my mug down before he could knock. I didn't want him knocking. I don't know why that mattered to me in that moment, but it did. I walked to the back door and unlocked it before he touched it, before he could even raise his hand. When he came in, the first thing I saw was his smile. That's what stopped me, because Darnell doesn't smile in the morning. Not like that. Not like something carefully placed on his face. Something about it didn't belong to him. "Morning, Mama," he said. Light, easy, almost rehearsed. And I just looked at him. My son, standing in my kitchen at 7:40 a.m., smiling like a stranger trying to pass as family. Something in me went quiet, not fear, not yet, something slower, like recognition without a name. I turned and reached for a mug anyway, because that's what mothers do when something feels wrong but hasn't fully become a problem yet. They make coffee. They keep the rhythm of normal. Darnell talked a lot about traffic, about weather, about a restaurant he and his wife Camille had visited. Camille. Her name came up once, then again, then again. I counted without meaning to, 4 times in 10 minutes. Each time, it sounded careful, not natural, like he was placing her into the conversation the way someone places a framed picture into the background of a video call, so you notice what they want you to see. I nodded, listened, said the right small things, but my attention wasn't on the words anymore. It was on him, on his hands. They didn't stop moving, touching the counter, adjusting the dish towel, folding it, unfolding it, folding it again. My son does not fidget. He never has. Even as a child, he used to sit so still it was like he was anchored to the floor. So I watched those hands like they belonged to someone I didn't fully recognize. Then came the question, "Do you want eggs?" "No," he said quickly, then paused. Then, "Actually, yeah, eggs are fine." I didn't react, but I noticed everything. He stayed almost an hour, long enough for the silence between words to start feeling heavier than the words themselves. When he finally stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He paused there, longer than usual. Then he hugged me, tight, too tight, and said, "You know I love you, right, Mama?" Not as part of a conversation, not naturally, just dropped into the air, like something he needed me to hold for him. I smiled. Of course I did. "I know," I said, and I watched him walk back to his car, drive away, disappear down the street like nothing had happened. But something had. I just didn't know what yet. Not fully. I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table. My coffee was still there, cold, had been cold the entire time, which meant one thing I couldn't ignore. I had been standing at that window longer than I realized, watching, waiting, and I couldn't remember exactly what I had been thinking while I did, only that something in me had already started paying attention before I understood why. And that is where this really begins. That afternoon, I told myself I was overthinking it. That's what we do first when something doesn't sit right. We try to return it to normal, put it back where it came from. Call it tiredness, call it age, call it nothing. So I cleaned the kitchen. I folded things that didn't need folding. I straightened drawers I had already straightened last week. And I avoided looking out the window because I didn't want to see his car again in my driveway and feel that same quiet pull in my chest. But then the phone rang. Renee, my youngest daughter. If Darnell is stillness, Renee is noise. She has never once called without filling the space inside the first 3 seconds of a conversation. Not in her entire life. So when I picked up and heard, "Hey mama, just checking on you," followed by silence, real silence, I knew something was off. I leaned back in my chair. "I'm fine," I said carefully. "Darnell stopped by this morning." A pause. Too fast. Then she said, "I know," and immediately corrected herself. I mean, he mentioned he might. But I had already heard it, that first version. I know, not I heard, not he told me, just I know, like she had been expecting it, like she already had the information before I spoke. I didn't push. That's another thing mothers learn. You don't pull too hard on a thread unless you're ready to see what unravels. So I let her talk. She told me about her youngest school play, about a leaking pipe under her sink, about ordinary life, things said too quickly, like she was trying to outrun something behind her. And I listened, but I wasn't really listening anymore. I was remembering something else. 6 weeks earlier, the last family dinner, all 6 children at my table, even Camille. That night had seemed normal at the time. But now, replaying it in my head, it looked different, sharper, cleaner, like a memory someone had edited without telling me. I remembered Camille and Renee standing near the hallway after dinner, not sitting, standing too close, talking too softly. And when I came into the room, both of them had smiled at the same exact moment, too synchronized, too quick, like they had already agreed on what expression to wear before I saw them. Back then, I thought nothing of it. Women talk. That's what families do. They form little corners inside larger rooms. But now I wasn't so sure, because memory changes shape when you start looking at it twice. After I hung up with Renee, I went to the back bedroom. That room has always been my quiet place, not because it is special, but because I made it special through repetition. I straighten things there when my mind won't sit still, and that day I needed something to sit still. I folded a blanket that was already folded. I adjusted a picture frame that didn't need adjusting, and I thought about Camille, my daughter-in-law, precise, careful, always speaking like every sentence had been weighed before release. She had stopped coming to Sunday dinners months ago. At first, it was her mother, then work, then schedules, then nothing at all. And I had accepted it, because that's what I do. I don't chase people, not even my children's spouses. But now I wondered what absence really meant, not just physically, but strategically. Because absence, I was learning, can be part of a pattern. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not properly. I lay there thinking about small things that suddenly didn't feel small. The way Darnell had smiled. The way Renee had paused. The way Camille had looked away too quickly when I spoke. And I told myself, you are imagining connections that don't exist. But even as I thought it, something inside me didn't agree. The next morning, I went to pick up my prescription at the pharmacy. That's where I ran into Curtis, my neighbor, 20 years living 4 houses down, a man who always knows everything without ever officially knowing anything. He smiled when he saw me. "How's the family?" he asked, casual as always. And then he added, Seen some folks around your place last week." I stopped walking. "What folks?" He shrugged. "Didn't recognize them. Thought maybe you had company." But I hadn't. Not that week. Not at all. I told him he must have been mistaken. He nodded politely, but his eyes said he wasn't convinced. And that was the problem. Because once someone plants a question in your mind, it doesn't leave just because the conversation ends. It follows you home, and it waits. That afternoon, I walked into my house differently. Not like someone returning home, like someone entering a space they suddenly weren't entirely sure belonged only to them. Everything looked normal, too normal. Living room, kitchen, hallway, same as always. Until I reached the small room off the corridor. My office. The chair was slightly out of place. Not much, maybe 6 inches. But I know where that chair belongs, because I put it there myself every single time. And then I saw the filing cabinet. Top drawer. Closed. Fully closed. I never fully close it. It sticks when shut tight. I leave it slightly open on purpose, so I can pull it easier. I stood there without opening it, just looking at it, because the truth is, you don't always need proof first. Sometimes your body understands before your mind agrees. And in that moment, my body already knew something had been inside my house while I was gone, and it wasn't by accident. I didn't open the drawer right away. That's the part people don't always understand. When something feels wrong, truly wrong, you don't rush toward it. You pause. Because once you confirm it, once you see it clearly, you can't go back to not knowing. And there is a moment just before that knowing where everything is still technically normal. I stood there with my hand resting on the handle of that filing cabinet, thinking, not guessing, not assuming, just thinking. Then I pulled it open. Slowly, the drawer slid out with that familiar resistance, the same slight drag it's had for years. Inside, everything looked exactly the way it always had. Neat, ordered, ordinary. And somehow that made it worse, because disorder would have been easier to understand. Mess is obvious. Mess tells you something happened. But this looked like someone had taken the time to put things back. Carefully, intentionally, like they didn't want to be noticed. I reached in and started going through the folders. Insurance papers, house documents, car title, everything in place, exactly where it belonged, until I got to the envelope, manila, plain, with my handwriting on it, and underneath that, faint, but still visible, Gerald's, my late husband. He had written his name there years ago, back when we used to keep everything together. I had never covered it up, just written over it, because some habits stay, even after people don't. I picked up the envelope, held it in both hands, and that's when I saw it. The flap. It wasn't sealed, not torn, not damaged, just opened, lifted, and tucked back in, neatly, like someone had been careful enough to think I might not notice, but not careful enough to understand that I would, because I remembered sealing that envelope, not vaguely, not generally, specifically. I had used a damp cloth, pressed the flap down smooth, placed a heavy book on top, and let it sit overnight. I remembered it because I had stood there afterward longer than I meant to, looking at Gerald's handwriting beneath mine. That kind of moment stays with you. You don't forget it, and you don't accidentally undo it either. I placed the envelope on top of the cabinet, didn't open it yet, not immediately. Instead, I walked out of the room, back into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and folded my hands, because something had just shifted. Quietly, permanently, someone had gone through my private documents, not just entered my home, not just moved through it, but searched it deliberately, and then sat across from me the next morning, smiling, talking about traffic. I looked out the window, at the backyard, at Gerald's fig tree, still standing, still alive, because I refused to let it die after he was gone. And I thought about my will. I had updated it 14 months ago, sat in a quiet office with my attorney, Mr. Beaumont, a careful man, the kind who doesn't rush words, the kind who understands that paperwork, like, that isn't just legal, it's personal. We went through everything, line by line. The house divided equally among all 6 children, a clause preventing any forced sale for 3 years. Time, space, protection, and then one private decision, one I hadn't told anyone, a slightly larger portion set aside for Renee, my youngest, because she needed it, because she always had, because love doesn't always divide evenly, even when fairness tries to. No one was supposed to know that. No one. I hadn't discussed it, hadn't hinted at it, hadn't written it anywhere outside that envelope. And yet, that envelope had been opened, carefully, quietly, by someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. I sat there for a long time before I finally stood up again, went back into the office, picked up the envelope, and opened it, this time for real. The pages were all there, 7 of them, unchanged, at least on the surface. But I didn't read it like I had written it. I read it like someone else had, like someone looking for angles, for leverage, for imbalance. And when I reached that section, Renee's portion, I stopped, because suddenly I wasn't just reading my will. I was seeing motive, clear, quiet, uncomfortable. And then something else surfaced in my mind, a memory I hadn't connected until that moment. Marcus, my 3rd child, a lunch we had 2 months ago, just the 2 of us. He had brought up the house, casually at first, then again, used the word burden, more than once, said I might be happier somewhere easier, smaller, simpler. I had brushed it off at the time, but now it didn't feel casual anymore. Nothing did, because pieces were starting to connect. Darnell, Marcus, Renee, Camille, different conversations, different moments, same direction. And then my phone rang. Darnell, that same evening. Just checking on you, Mama. His voice was light. Easy again. Too easy. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing important. Nothing real. And then, right in the middle of it, he said, me and Camille have been getting our finances organized lately. I said that was good. He paused, then added, you got everything in order on your end, like up to date. My hand flattened against the counter, without me even thinking about it, because in 41 years, my son had never asked me that, not once, not after his father died, not when it would have made sense. Only now, after that envelope had been opened, after someone had been in my house, after something had already started moving behind my back. I do, I said, calm, steady, everything in order. Good, he said quickly, that's good. And then he hung up, just like that. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, phone still in my hand, and this time, there was no denying it. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't imagination. This was something coordinated, something already in motion. And I was the only one who hadn't been told. I didn't sleep that night, not in the way people mean when they say they didn't sleep. I wasn't restless. I wasn't tossing or turning. I was still, completely still, lying there in the dark while my mind moved quietly, steadily, like water underneath ice. Because once you know something is wrong, your thoughts stop arguing with it. They start organizing around it. By morning, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't even questioning. I was waiting for confirmation. Something solid. Something I could hold that wasn't just instinct. So I got dressed early, walked into the office, and sat down with the envelope in front of me. Open now. Exposed. No pretending left. And I stayed there until the phone rang. Mr. Beaumont. Right on time. Dorothy, he said warmly, the way he always does. How are you? Polite. Measured. Careful. He always believed conversations deserved a proper beginning. And I respected that about him. But that morning, I didn't need warmth. I needed truth. I have a question, I said. My voice didn't shake, didn't rise, didn't fall, just held steady. I told him what I suspected, that someone had accessed my will, that I had reason to believe it wasn't accidental. There was a pause on the other end, not long, but long enough. And in that pause, I felt it, that shift, the one where a professional decides how much to say and how to say it. When he spoke again, his voice hadn't lost its warmth, but it had gained something else. Precision. Dorothy, he said slowly, about 6 weeks ago, I received a call. My hand tightened slightly on the edge of the desk, from someone identifying themselves as your son. I didn't interrupt, didn't ask which one, because I already knew. Darnell, he said, just like that. Plain. No hesitation. And something inside me settled, not because it hurt less, but because it had a shape now, a name, a direction. He continued. The questions were general at first, about estate documentation, legal processes. Another pause, shorter this time, but then they became more specific. I closed my eyes briefly, just once. What kind of specific? I asked. The kind, he said carefully, that suggested prior knowledge of the document's contents. There it was, clear, undeniable. Someone hadn't just opened my will. They had studied it. I thanked him, calmly, asked him not to share any information with anyone calling on my behalf unless I approved it directly. He agreed immediately, apologized, even. But I didn't need an apology, because the problem wasn't him. The problem was already inside my family. When I hung up, I didn't move right away. I just sat there, looking at the desk, at the envelope, at my own handwriting, and I let the timeline settle into place. 6 weeks ago, first Sunday in March, the last family dinner, the last time everyone had been under one roof, the last time I had looked around that table and felt full, complete, like everything I had built still held together. And somewhere around that same time, my son had called my attorney, asking how to challenge my will. I leaned back in the chair slowly, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel it fully. Not anger, not yet, something heavier, something quieter. Disappointment has a different weight when it comes from your children, because it doesn't crash into you. It settles. It spreads. It rewrites things you thought were stable. I stood up after a while, walked through the house. Slowly. Kitchen, living room, hallway, everything exactly the same. Same furniture, same walls, same light coming through the windows. But none of it felt the same, because I was seeing it differently now. This wasn't just my home anymore. It was something they had already started evaluating, assessing, positioning, not as memory, not as history, but as value. I went back to the office, sat down again, and picked up my will. Read it one more time, not as a mother, but as someone on the outside, someone looking for advantage. And when I reached that clause, the 3-year hold on selling the house, I stopped, because now I understood that wasn't protection to them. It was an obstacle, a delay, a barrier standing between them and something immediate, something accessible, something valuable. The house, paid off, 11 years, every brick in it tied to a life I had built with their father, every corner holding something they had once been part of, and now something they were trying to move around. Without me, Then another thought came. Uninvited, but clear. Real estate letters. 2 of them. Unsolicited. In the past year. Asking if I'd consider selling. I had thrown them away. Didn't even think twice. But now, I wondered, who else knew about this house? Who else had been told it might be available? And more importantly, who had done the telling? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. And for the first time, I asked the question I had been avoiding. Not why. I already knew why. Money, control, convenience dressed up as concern. The real question was, how far had they already gone? Because opening an envelope, calling an attorney, that's not where something starts. That's somewhere in the middle, which meant there were steps before that. Conversations, plans, agreements, things said in rooms I wasn't in, about me, about my life, about my home. And that's when something inside me changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just decisively. Because whatever this was, it wasn't confusion anymore. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was intention, and intention requires response. The call came on a Friday, late enough in the day to feel deliberate, early enough that it wouldn't seem urgent. Darnell. His name lit up on my phone like it always had. Familiar, ordinary, but nothing about him felt ordinary anymore. "Hey, Mama," he said, "can I come by tomorrow morning? I got something I want to talk to you about." There was a flatness to it, not nervous, not emotional, controlled, like the words had been used before, just not with me. I said yes. Of course I did. "Come for breakfast." I added. "You don't have to cook," he said quickly. I smiled to myself. "I know," I said, "but I will." Because some things I decided were not going to change, not for him, not for anyone, not in my house. The next morning, I was up before the sun. 5:30, the way I've always been. I made biscuits from scratch, cracked eggs into a pan, sliced fruit the way I used to when all 6 of my children still lived under this roof, and Saturdays meant noise, laughter, and someone always asking for more than what was already on their plate. I set the table for 2, used Gerald's mother's cloth napkins, the ones I only bring out for family. And maybe that was the point. Not for him, for me, to remind myself exactly where I was sitting and what this place meant. Darnell arrived at 9, right on time, alone. He stepped inside and paused when he saw the table, just for a second, but I saw it, that flicker, something between guilt and recognition. Then it was gone, replaced with that same careful composure. We sat down. He picked at his food more than he ate it, took small bites, long pauses, and we did what people do when they're standing at the edge of something they don't want to name yet. We talked around it. Weather, his car needing service, nothing real, nothing that mattered, until he set his fork down, placed both hands flat on the table. And in that moment, I had to look away, because that gesture, that exact gesture, was his father's. Gerald used to do that whenever he had something difficult to say. Both hands down, grounding himself before speaking, and seeing it now, in my son, on this morning. It hit something in me I wasn't prepared for. I steadied myself, then looked back at him. He took a breath. "We've been talking," he said. "We. Not I. Not me. We." That word landed heavier than anything else he could have chosen. "Me, Marcus, Renee." He paused. "And Camille." There it was. All of them. Named. Present. Even the ones not in the room. "We're just worried about you, Mama." I didn't respond. I let him keep going. "Not your health," he added quickly. "We know you're doing fine. It's just..." Another pause. Longer this time. "The house." I felt something settle in my chest. Not surprise. recognition, like hearing a line you already knew was coming. The upkeep, it's a lot, he continued. And long term, we just don't know if it's practical for you to be here alone. Practical. That word again. Same tone Marcus had used months ago. Same direction. Different voice. We talked to someone, he said. A consultant. The word was soft, carefully chosen. Like it had been tested before it reached me. They showed us some options. Really nice places. Communities. Support. Activities. He kept talking. But I had already heard enough. Because now I understood something clearly. This conversation didn't start here. It had been built somewhere else. Refined. Practiced. Polished. And now it was being delivered to me like a presentation. And with the value of the house, he said, you'd actually have more flexibility than you think. That's when I spoke. Quietly. When did you have the house valued? He froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. A few months ago, he said. I held his eyes. Did you do that with me? Silence. Then. No. Honest. At least that. We didn't want to worry you before we had something solid. I nodded slowly, and in that moment, I felt it. Not anger. Not even betrayal in the sharp sense. Something deeper. The realization that they had already moved forward. Without me, that decisions had been made. Steps taken. People contacted. All while I was still living my life. Believing I was included in it. I looked at him across the table. My son, the boy I had raised, the man sitting in front of me now, and I saw both at the same time. Layered, not separate, just more complete than I had allowed myself to see before. Do they all know you're here? I asked. He nodded. All of them. A small hesitation. Then, yes. Sylvia too. Even from 2 states away. Even she had known. I let that settle. Didn't rush past it, because some truths deserve to be felt fully. I asked one more question. February and March bank statements. I said, do you know anything about those? This time, the shift was clearer. Not dramatic, but undeniable. A flicker. A tightening. I don't know what you mean, he said. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't, but I didn't push, because I already understood something important. I was not going to get the whole truth in one sitting, and I didn't need to. I had enough. He reached across the table then, placed his hand over mine, warm, familiar, and said the line I think he believed more than anything else he'd said that morning. Mama, we're doing this because we love you. I looked at his hand. Then at him, and I answered carefully, I know you believe that. Not it's true. Not I agree. Just, I know you believe it. He heard the difference. I saw it in his eyes. And he didn't argue, didn't correct me, which told me everything I needed to know. We finished the meal in silence. Mostly, just the sound of forks against plates, chairs shifting. The small noises people make when words are no longer enough. Something had changed between us. Not broken, not gone, but shifted permanently, and we both knew it. Part 6. The locks I changed myself. Final. The house was quiet after he left. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. Not the kind you welcome. This was different. This was the kind of quiet that settles after something has been said that cannot be taken back. I stood at the sink for a long time, looking out at the backyard, at Gerald's fig tree, still standing where it always had, still rooted, still mine. And that word, mine, felt different now, not possessive, not defensive, just clear, because for the first time in weeks, everything was clear. Not easy, not painless, but clear. And clarity has a way of steadying you, even when it hurts. 2 days later, I changed the locks. I didn't call anyone, didn't ask for help. I went to the hardware store myself, picked out the kit, came home, and pulled up a video on my tablet. It took longer than it should have. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be. And there were moments, small, frustrating ones, where the screwdriver slipped or the alignment didn't quite sit right. But I kept going because it mattered that I did it myself, not because I had to, but because I needed to. When I finished, I tested both doors. Locked, unlocked, locked again. And then I sat down at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, hot this time, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not relief, something stronger than that. Ownership, not just of the house, but of myself inside it. That same week, I called each of my children, one by one, not together. No audience, no performance, just truth, plain and direct. I told them what had happened, what I knew, what I understood, and what would not happen again. I told them that going around me, into my home, into my documents, into my life, was not acceptable, not under the name of love, not under the excuse of concern, not under any condition. I told them I was not a problem to be managed. I was their mother, and if they had something to say, they would say it to me, not about me, not around me, to me. Renee cried. Of course she did. She always cries. Her voice broke halfway through the call, apologies spilling out faster than meaning could keep up with them. I let her cry. I didn't soften my words to stop it, because sometimes love requires you to let discomfort stay in the room. Marcus was different, defensive at first, sharp around the edges, then quiet, that kind of quiet that means he heard me even if he didn't like what he heard. We haven't spoken much since, and maybe that distance will close, or maybe it won't. I've made peace with both. Sylvia called me back 3 days later. She didn't explain, didn't justify. She just said, "I should have told you." And she was right. And I told her so. There's a kind of respect in honesty like that, even when it comes late. Darnell calls twice a week now. We talk about life, about ordinary things. And on the surface, it sounds normal. But underneath, there's a space. Not wide, not cold, just present. That quiet understanding that something has changed. And neither of us has tried to name it out loud. Maybe we will one day, or maybe we won't. Some things between a parent and child don't get resolved. They get carried, adjusted to, lived with. I still love him. That never changed. But love and trust are not the same thing. And I think for a long time, I let myself believe they were. I updated my will the following week. Sat across from Mr. Beaumont again, made changes, added language I should have added the first time. Clearer now, stronger, not out of anger, but out of understanding, because clarity teaches you how to protect what matters. The bank statements never fully explain themselves. I changed the mailing address, opened a P.O. box, set up online access, something I had resisted for years. Nothing appeared missing, no money gone, no obvious damage, but the question of why still lingers, and maybe it always will. I've learned to live with that. Not every truth arrives completely. Some come in pieces. Some never finish forming. The house, though, that part is settled. It's not going anywhere. Not now. Not like this. This is where I built my life, where I raised 6 children, where I buried a husband, where I stayed when it would have been easier to leave, where every wall holds something that doesn't belong to anyone else. And the fig tree, it's still there. I still talk to it sometimes, quietly, when no one's around. I figured Gerald would understand. He always did. I am 63 years old. I am not fragile. I am not confused. And I am not finished. What I am now is clear. Clear about my children. Clear about love. and clear about something I didn't fully understand before, that people can love you and still make decisions that serve themselves, not because they are cruel, not because they are evil, but because they are human. And sometimes being human is complicated in ways love alone doesn't fix. I don't think my children are villains. I won't tell this story that way, but I also won't pretend I didn't see what I saw. Because once you see something clearly, you don't get to unsee it. And maybe that's the real ending. Not the confrontation, not the locks, not the will, but the clarity, the quiet, steady understanding of where things truly stand. I think about Gerald sometimes, about what he would have done. And then I remember he would have changed those locks the same night. No hesitation, no second guessing. And I smile a little when I think that, because in the end, I did all right. I really did